Tom Mulcair, our CTV News political commentator and former NDP leader. You're smiling right now, Tom. How is
Yeah.
it watching that?
Well, it's interesting because you're not used to seeing Mr. Trudeau feel compelled to have a room full of people applauding him, but he clearly needed a little bit of love, especially after what was otherwise a very successful cabinet retreat in Montreal. You know, Roger, he can't catch a break. Things went well. It was well choreographed. They had a few substantive things to announce that we're going to do something about everything from car theft to having answers with regard to the overrunning of the numbers with regard to foreign students. It was a well-run show. And boom, out of the blue, something they have zero control of, the federal court rules that they were wrong to invoke the Emergencies Act. And the whole thing took over everything that they had just accomplished. It got erased in a nanosecond. So here what we see is Mr. Trudeau doing the beta version of what will eventually be some type of campaign speech. What we saw yesterday was one member of his caucus, who's apparently been made to walk the plank, if not just walk it back, had said, let's leave it up to the members to decide if they want to have Mr. Trudeau stick around, and everybody will be fine with that decision. Well, apparently there were enough senior people in caucus to be able to talk to Mr. McDonald, and he's thought better of it. He's no longer singing the same tune. But the very fact that it took place, I think, is an indication that there's something going on there. We saw it before Christmas, Roger. You remember when more than 20 members of his caucus went offside and had a very different view on what should be done. They were pleading for an immediate ceasefire with regard to Israel-Gaza, and Mr. Trudeau had a completely different point of view. It's been very difficult for him on that issue and on others. We're not used to seeing Mr. Trudeau back-footed with regard to his caucus. He's an extraordinarily gifted person when it comes to interpersonal communications generally, and especially with people like his caucus and his cabinet. So keep an eye on it, because I don't think that will be the last person who says, you know what, we need to start looking at who's our leader.
Let's go to that speech a little bit. Anything that stands out in it, key things that you didn't expect him to say, or things that surprised you?
It was a cornucopia speech, a little bit of everything, talking about how great we are, how we're the smartest people in the world, the best educated, look at the G7. But you know what? A lot of that is true. And it wasn't very refined. You could tell it was the beginning version. He was clearly reading off a teleprompter because he slipped a few times, which is also uncharacteristic for Mr. Trudeau. But that's an indication, Roger, that speech was relatively newly crafted. So it was put together with, okay, let's put everything in the window that we can think of that shows that we're not doing badly. But at the same time, today, big study out by the Montreal Economic Institute. Now, it's a right-wing think tank, but this is not an ideological piece they put out. It was just facts and numbers about the explosive growth of the size of the civil service. And that goes right back to something Pierre Poilievre talks about. Are you capable of actually running the government, in addition to having, as Mr. Trudeau correctly said, he's got lots of friends in many different countries. But even on the international stage, we're at loggerheads right now with the two most populous countries in the world, both of which are very important economies. That's China and India. So even his strongest suits, like international affairs, have been suffering. And so he's trying to put forward a very positive balance sheet of what he's accomplished since he was there, saying, we are the envy of a lot of the other leaders in the world, and here are some of the good things about us. I don't know if that's enough to start turning things around between him and Mr. Poilievre, because if you take a deep look at the polling, it's not so much that the Liberal brand is kaput as the fact that people are really starting to apply the American rule of 8 years maximum to Trudeau. He's in his 9th year now. We don't have that as a constitutional rule, Roger. But it's almost as if unconsciously people are saying, you know what, we've seen enough, thank you, but we'd like to have something else.
It's the kind of fish and guests both start to stink after a certain amount of time, right?
Yes, exactly.
Maybe we do need a change. Is it dangerous with how he is going after Poilievre, talking about MAGA coming to Canada? I mean, there is the possibility we could see Trump as the president of the United States again at the end of this year. Is it a dangerous game to be playing that?
Yes. Look, there's nobody in any political party who will dispute what I'm about to say. Our most important relationship in the world is our relationship with the United States. That's not even open to question. So Trudeau is playing a bit of a dangerous game, because if indeed Trump pulls this off, we know that he's got the Republican candidacy wrapped up, but if he is able to defeat Biden, they will have been using his themes, make America great again, and indeed Trump's name, almost swear words. It's an insult to call Poilievre, to say that he's like Trump and that he's a MAGA. You got to think that one through, because you will be facing Poilievre, that's true, but you'll also be facing Trump. And he is quite an unpredictable character. We learned that from his first 4 years.
Would that drive Canadians, you think, towards Trudeau or towards Poilievre if Trump were to win after what's been said by Trudeau?
I believe that the thinking around Mr. Trudeau is that it can only help him, because Trump has already promised to be even crazier than he was in his first 4 years. I mean, let's remember, this is a guy who had all the, this is something that university professors who study this look at. They're not comparing him to, this is not Nazism, it's fascism. What he was willing to do, what he did on January 6th, but more importantly, his absolute disdain and disregard for the constitutionally empowered institutions of the United States. He accomplished very little, by the way, during those 4 years. I mean, if you look at it objectively, other than keeping us amused, he didn't get a lot done. So now he says when he comes back, he's going to start, and this is him saying, this is not somebody putting words in his mouth. He's going to be a dictator from day one. He's going to act like a dictator. I don't know too many Americans who like that. They love Trump. They love his ability to tell everybody to take a hike, to be totally the opposite of politically correct, to say that respected news outlets are fake news. People kind of take a shine to that, at least enough of them to make this a very close race. But at the end of the day, the 18 to 20% of people who didn't like Trump and were with Nikki Haley, for example, where are they going to go? Are they going to find a home with Donald Trump? Or are they going to say, this Biden guy might be, pretty long in the tooth, but he's certainly less dangerous for the country and its history than Trump?
And then coming back to Trudeau, I'm assuming he's not stepping down, or at least he's not going to. Is there time within the party, if there is dissent, to try and force him out? Would that be the best thing, or should they stay with him now?
I think he's going to be the one to decide this, because the other parties are not going to come together and throw him out. People often say, would Mr. Singh change the deal and vote against Trudeau? If he does, I can guarantee you that the Bloc Québécois will prop Trudeau up, as they've already done once when the NDP voted the other way. No, nobody's in a mood for an early election right now, especially now with the Conservatives seeming to rule the roost. Is Trudeau going to stick around? My thinking, based on experience and knowing the guy, is that he's going to give himself the runway of the spring session. So he'll give it his best, like he just did in front of the cameras there. That was a well-crafted speech. He did his best to deliver it. He was trying to, stir up the troops a little bit. But if he gets to, let's say, Easter, and there's just nothing happening, like no movement, the needle hasn't moved, the numbers are still awful for him, then he's going to have a really tough choice to make. Does he stick around? I would suspect he would go to the end of the spring session in any event. People tend to forget that Jean Chrétien wrote a very interesting rule book for leaving, but giving an advance date far in advance. So would Trudeau say something like, I'm going to be stepping down, I'm going to ask the party to organize something at the beginning of 25, give a little bit of time to the new leader, but not too much to the others to destroy them and react, and try to hope that honeymoon period would be enough to carry them through the next election. I think that's the type of thing he might be contemplating. He's probably not sharing it with a lot of people, though.
Would that lead to a snap election, do you think? Would the opposition try to take advantage of that?
Well, it would take all the other parties together. And like I say, people know about the NDP's deal with the Liberals, but they think less about the Bloc. The Bloc doesn't have a lot of money in the bank. They did much better in the last election than they were expecting to, thanks to a very bizarre question during the English debate, of all things. And so, the Liberals were set to take about 10 or 12 more seats, and that was everybody's calculations. The numbers were there, and the Bloc wound up holding on to everything it had. So are they going to be that lucky this time around? Nothing is less certain. And we're going to see whether or not Trudeau is able to move the dial. Is he able to move his numbers up a little bit? It'd be pretty hard for him to go lower than where he is now. Mm-hmm. But can he start building on that? That was what we saw today, an attempt, Roger, to move things, for him anyway, in the right direction.
Okay, let's go back to this retreat that's happening this week then. What are they going to talk about as they head into the next session?
Well, they're going to be two different things. What are they going to talk about publicly? The types of things you just heard there. They're going to talk about the numbers. They're going to talk about education, what they're doing to fix the obvious problems in immigration, especially with regard to students. They're going to talk about their track record. And in the meantime, in their own discussions, over supper, amongst themselves, for a couple of glasses of wine, the conversations might turn to, okay, what do we do? We know we can't possibly win an election with numbers like that. Do we start doing like Mr. McDonald, talking about it more openly? That was a very courageous move, by the way. But it's also the type of move that doesn't make you a lot of friends around the Prime Minister's office. Next time you call for something for your part of the country, good luck. So I think that it does require a certain amount of temerity for people to simply say, look, it's like the big important dossiers like Gaza, Israel, that were on the table and several people went offside. is it going to be possible for sitting Liberals to say, you know what, there is something to this idea of letting the members decide whether or not he should continue as our leader? I think that that's some of the backroom discussions that will indeed be taking place, Roger.
Is there something that they could come out of this that could help turn the ship around? One thing, or is it a lot of things that need to happen?
It's extremely difficult because, the environmental side had some really good policies. The carbon tax was something that was going to help reduce Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. They threw in the towel starting in the Maritimes on home heating fuel. And then, of course, that just opened up the door for Poilievre and the Conservatives to say, well, what about natural gas in Ontario or, other fossil fuels elsewhere? So every time they think that they've got something going for themselves, they either back off themselves and it causes other problems, or the thing just doesn't work. Trudeau's best hand, I always thought, was his international role. Canadians like seeing us on the world stage playing that sort of key role. But it's just been a fumble after a fumble with China, with India. It's not that we don't have a complaint about China or a complaint about India's role in an assassination, but it's how you rolled it out, and that was very much on Mr. Trudeau.
Okay. Tom, thank you as always for your insight.
Good to be with you. All the best.